All right, here we are. Good evening. Let's turn to Psalm 62. I'm going to do a little psalm tonight. And next week, I think we're supposed to start a new series in the book of Esther, so that'll be happening next week. We finished our Thessalonians thing, so I'm just taking a break tonight, just kind of doing a little devotional with us tonight to prep us for prayer. All right, Psalm 62. Let me read some of this and then we'll get going here. Truly my soul silently waits for God. From him comes my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense, and I shall not be greatly moved. How long will you attack a man? You shall be slain, all of you, like a leaning wall and a tottering fence. They only consult to cast him down from his high position. They delight in lies, they bless with their mouth, but they curse inwardly. Selah. My soul waits silently for God alone, for my expectation is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense, and I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my strength and my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Selah. Surely men of low degree are a vapor. Men of high degree are a lie. If they are weighed on the scales, they are altogether lighter than vapor. Do not trust in oppression, nor vainly hope in robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them. God has spoken once, and twice I have heard him. I have heard this, that power belongs to God. Also to you, O Lord, belongs mercy. For you render to each one according to his work. This is one of those unusual psalms. It has some repetition intentionally, and obviously it's asking a question it's really answering the question, but the question that's underneath all of this is simply this: is God enough? I mean, I think about my life and I think about trusting God. The bottom line is, how much do I actually trust God? And we could sit here all night and go through, the idea of how much or how little we trust God. I have a feeling that I don't trust God near enough to what this writer is talking about. An argument goes out that, well, you can trust God, but you have to live in a practical world. You've got to deal with certain things, from pain to sickness to, just all kinds of things, economic things and so on, that there are things that perhaps in our own strength we can fix or we can manage. And that's true. And so that gets in the clutter of how much we really trust God. And in our culture, when we have a zillion resources, it's even more difficult to say that I fully trust God when I have so many things within my reach that I can use as resources to get in and out of trouble, to fix things, to manage things. So that's a big issue. MacArthur wrote a book a while back, The Sufficiency of Christ. And that book, the premise of that book is that we should trust Christ with everything. And that's really what the writer here is talking about in Psalm 62. That there's been an argument that's been raised, of course, against MacArthur's book, and it's this very thing, that there has to be legitimacy given to, experience, pragmatism. There has to be a sense of professional counseling should be something that we should seek once in a while. That's out there. Somebody needs certain kinds of medicines. Why would they not get that? In other words, the argument is you can't just have a fully trust Christ without trusting in what he's supplied us. And I kind of agree with that you can't just say in a blanket statement, I trust Christ, and then everything else is sort of stuff I'm still going to do anyway. I'm either going to say I trust him or I don't. And so it's kind of an ongoing issue. And in this text, there's something that stands out. It's a dominant theme in this text. And it's not so much the issue of trust. The dominant theme here is a little tiny word in Hebrew. It's one of the smallest words in Hebrew. If you think about an apostrophe and then two little letters, A-K. In Hebrew, it's ach. You have to sound like you're clearing your throat when you say it, but it's A-K, ach, okay? 8 times it's used in this text. It's the only psalm in the Bible like this. It's in here for a reason, and it's a reason that you can't just deny that it's here and why it's here. And so let me just show you the 8 places first. And the first word is truly. That's actually ach. And there's various words for this little tiny Hebrew word. Truly is one of those things. In verse 2, he only, there's the word again, A-K. He only is my rock. You'll see it in verse 4, against, talking about the enemies of this person. They only consult to cast him down. That's the A-K there. You'll see it in verse 5. My soul waits silently for God alone. It's exclusive. For my expectation is from him. He only, there it is again in verse 6, is my rock and my salvation. Down in verse 9, surely men of low degree. Again, is being used there. So there's this kind of understanding that this distinguishes this psalm from others, and this theme is very pronounced here for its reason. So the A-K, this little word ak, is these key words, the word only, the word truly, the word fully. It's an exclusionary adverb. So whenever it's used, it's saying this is exclusionary. This is the only thing that's being said here, or it's the only point that's being made. It's the only resource there is. I mean, that's how it's used all through this text, which makes it unique in that sense. And so I was reading a guy named Andrew McLaren, or Alexander McLaren, if you don't know who he is. He's an older commentary fellow. He's passed away long ago. But he made this statement, which is very unique. He says this, that one word, A-K, or ach, is the record of conflict and the trophy of victory. And what he's saying in that whole thing is that this little word is expressing the difficulty and the narrowness and the very essence of our faith. That basically everything I do believe, everything I stand on, everything that I put my life against, the most important things in my life, all narrowed down to this word in relationship to how I believe God takes care of me. If I believe he's truly, or he's only the source of my salvation, verse 2 says he only is my rock. If that's true, or if he only is my salvation, and obviously we can't get saved outside of Jesus. There is no salvation outside of Jesus. So it's true that applies really well. You can make that application easy. When I say he is my defense, or my only defense, that becomes an interesting possibility. I shall not be greatly moved, or the word means shaken. So when trouble comes, if I'm saying he only is my rock and my salvation, or he's my only defense, that becomes something I have to ask myself, is that really true? And that becomes something we all have to face and work through. The psalmist is basically saying to us, it's David speaking, but he's reminding all of us that this is so critical for us to be able to narrow this down and say, he is my absolute full defense. Then the psalmist in the beginning here, he says, truly, again, here's this word that narrows it down to, there's nothing else. He says, truly my soul silently waits for God. In other words, when I get in trouble, and he is in trouble, that's why he's talking here. When he's in trouble, he's facing trouble, he's saying, the one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to silently wait for God. When you know something's coming, when I know something's coming, maybe it's not something that I've caused, it's just something that's going to happen. And I know it's not a good thing, and it's something that I have to face or deal with, or an issue of that kind. The tendency is, what is our first thing we tend to do? If you're like me, I start looking for resources. I start looking for, okay, what do I have to do here? What do I have to be prepared for? Who knows what it is, what I'm talking about. It could be anything. But the tendency is that we start looking and start searching for how we're going to respond, what we're going to need, what resources do I have to have? Can I get through this? Can I deal with this? Can I face this? And you kind of go through all those things in a gymnastics in our mind that, kind of hopefully gets us ready for this event that's coming. He's talking about in verses 3 and 4 facing an enemy. So he says, how long will you attack a man? So he's under attack right now when he writes this. He says, you shall be slain, all of you. And he refers to this like a leaning wall and a tottering fence. In other words, he's just saying to himself, because I've spent time alone with God, I have silently waited for God. Because he's my only rock and my only salvation. He's my only defense. I'm not going to be shaken by this event. I'm not going to lose it, even though, humanly speaking, I think David's saying, I can't win this on my own. I don't know what you and I would be going through that might happen this way, and probably maybe nothing right now. Maybe we're talking about something that happens to you a week, a month, a year from now. But something's going to come into our life that could shake us to the very core if we're not thinking like this. So this is one of those Psalms that you read, and if you're not in something as an event right now in your life, this is something you read to prepare yourself for the event that's coming. Right? I mean, when I look for when I get on my phone and I look at the weather, we're looking at the weather. If we're going to go drive to Canada, or if I'm going to go down south to see relatives, one of the first things we always do, we get on the thing and, okay, let's check a week ahead and see what's coming. Dave Adams and Becky Adams were here this Sunday visiting. We went out to lunch together. Marilyn was going to meet with Becky Monday morning, but gets a message from Becky, which was true. Really bad snow was coming into Virginia, and they had to get home and try to beat that storm. And that was a whopper storm. I forget how many inches hit Lynchburg, 6 to 8 inches, something like that. So that's a lot for there. They live in a bowl, so you get a lot of snow there. Just shuts it down. Anyway, so you look in your phone, you try to prepare ahead and say, okay, here's what I can or cannot do. Here's what I think we should do, and you try to resolve things. So that kind of stuff we can do. But when you're into something that you can't manage, you can't handle, it's bigger than you are. This is what David's saying. I can tell you this, he's saying, truly, I silently wait for God. So I'm just going to get quiet, bow myself before him. I'm going to be listening for him to communicate with me on how to handle or how to manage or how to react to the situation that I'm in. And he comes out of that by saying this statement, how long, he's speaking to the enemies, not to them directly, but he's certainly talking about them. How long will you attack a man? How long are you going to keep this up? You shall be slain, all of you, that you're not going to make it. He's speaking out of a confidence that can't be his. This is not him saying, I'm going to do this to you, or my army is going to do this to you. It's him basically communicating what he knows God's going to do in their lives. And he says, your energy, your work toward me, your flaring yourself up and trying to be something. He says, you're like a leaning wall and a tottering fence. You don't stand a chance, is what he's saying. And then he identifies this fact that they only consult to cast him down, talking about David himself, from his high position. They wanted to knock him off as being king. Most think that this is one of those times when David is talking about his son Absalom, who wanted to throw him off the throne, who wanted to defeat him. And men were coming after David for that. That may be true. We don't know for sure. But when he says here that they only consult to cast him down from his high position, they delight in lies. And then he says, they bless with their mouth, but they curse inwardly. he's basically saying they only have one agenda. And, to knock David down, it may not mean that they want to kill him, but they certainly want to remove him. But what's interesting is that when you just sort of take this psalm and put it into my context, put it into your context, I have to remind myself. I was writing something today, and I was just reminding myself, and something I'm going to be sharing with others later. Satan has an agenda with us that we can so easily forget about. Because if you had a good day today, you're probably not thinking about Satan. Quite frankly, I can go a lot of days and not think about Satan or hell or the power of demonic forces. I don't normally every day think about that. But what is Satan's agenda? What is Satan's agenda with us? Exactly. To rob, kill, and destroy. I mean, he wants to destroy me and you. He wants to destroy your spouse. He wants to destroy your kids. He wants to destroy the institution of your home. He wants to destroy our church, our testimony, any kind of positive impact we have in the community around us. He wants to ruin that, destroy it, decay it any way he can. That's his agenda. And you know what? His agenda is usually never in neutral. It's just that if I have a decent day, I'm not thinking about that, but he's still on my tail looking for a way to take me down, right? That's something we have to remind ourselves about. So when David writes here, he's just saying, I have this enemy, and he says, how long will you attack a man? He's just saying this, they're relentless. And he's understanding that, but yet he's not living in this uncontrolled fear. He's not shaking about this because he spent time with God and came out of that time with God, I think, with an inner peace. He just says, he identifies what they're all about. They bless with their mouth, but inside they're cursing. So people around me, he's just saying, those who are around me, I used this the last time we were together to talk about false friends. But here we're just looking at the fact that, people around him were smiling and trying to politically be a friend or agree on things, try to get along, but inside they're plotting his demise at the same time, kind of like what we have in politics today in our own country. So that's going on. And then what happens is that David had to, as he thinks about that, and this is one of those things that always gets me, if you get stuck thinking about the enemy or the problem that's coming, if something is big enough that, okay, you can't get it out of your mind. Maybe you spent quiet time with God, but maybe you feel okay, but yet it's still there. It's still lingering. You're still worrying about it. It's just coming up. So look what he does. He actually says the same thing over again. This is an intentional repetition because David wants us to know as he goes through this that it's not like a one-day stand. Okay, I prayed. I'm settled. Everything's okay. Enemies are defeated, and then he goes on with his life. He's coming back and saying he had to say all this truth over again to himself. So in verse 5, he says the same thing over again. My soul waits silently for God alone. He uses the same words almost. My expectation is from him. So now he uses a stronger word. If you have a translation that says my hope, you have to be careful because there's two ways to use hope, right? There's the hope of I wish something happens, and there's the hope that says I know something's going to happen. And so when he uses this word expectation, he's talking about what he knows is going to happen from God. My expectation is from him. So he uses another awk word here in verse 6. He only is my rock and my salvation. He's my defense. I shall not be shaken. Then he just reminds us, in God is my salvation and my glory. So here he uses another interesting word here. Again, in God is my salvation. God's going to save me. God does save me. I am saved because of God. But then he adds this other little statement here, which is a great little statement. In God is my salvation and my glory. He's just saying that, and when he uses the word glory, he's talking about his ability to testify that he's saved. So when someone stands up and says, I found Christ, I gave my life to Christ, he's changed my life, and they're sharing a personal testimony of salvation, that is someone experiencing and expressing glory to the Lord God for what God's done in their life. And that's what David's saying here. And God is my salvation and my glory, or my testimony, if you will. He's the rock of my strength. He's my refuge. My refuge is in God. And so he kind of just nails that down. And then he preaches a sermon to us. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your heart before him. God is our refuge, a refuge for us. And then he wants us to pause and just sort of take that in. So he says, Selah. Trust in him at all times. So there's this challenge of narrowing down my life and saying, wait a minute, I truly need to sort of pause, take a step back, and consider this. Is God my only trust? Is he my only rock? Or am I adding things to that statement? If I said, or I tell you that it happens, someone can give their life to Christ, I thought. I can be with them when they're doing that. And then you kind of get the impression that sometimes people make decisions, but they're making those decisions sort of in the safety and in the blessing of being with someone else. It might be a boyfriend-girlfriend thing where maybe one of those two is a believer, the other one's not, but they are going to profess to be that because that's going to improve the relationship they're going to have with that person. They know that that's what they could do, and that's going to make things better. And so sometimes that's the way we make decisions. And so that's a problem if that's happening. So really, they're not really trusting in God for that decision. They're trusting in the reception and acceptance of other believers around them that's a genuine thing. That is a huge concern. And I think sometimes that happens in a lot of folks' lives when they sort of say that they're making decisions, taking certain actions, but their actions and decisions are not based on maybe trusting fully in God, but maybe trusting in other things and other avenues that sort of add to that package. So they think that they're trusting in God, and really sometimes they're not. So that's a big issue. Then he comes and he talks about, when he says this, surely, here's that word again, surely men of low degree are a vapor, men of high degree are a lie. And all of a sudden he's identifying again, he's referring back to this verses 3 and 4. He's talking about his enemies and those against him. And he's just making the statement, surely men of low degree are a vapor. I've been, when I was a young man, I worked in the steel mills in Gary, Indiana. I don't know if you know anything about Gary, Indiana. Go online, you'll find out. It's a bad place. East Chicago and Gary, Indiana, just two really terrible places in the world. But I worked in the steel mills. I got good money for doing that, but it's a job you wouldn't want to have normally. And from gang guys to just the toughest dudes were there working with me. I'm this nice, innocent little white boy working with a bunch of rough, tough, dark guys, Cuban guys, all kinds of different guys there. And it was my first experience even being around that kind of crowd. Pornography was all over the walls. These guys just live in a different world. They try to say the most base things they can to blow you away, especially if they think you're coming from a different place than they are. And I was. My dad was also a foreman in the mill, and they knew that, so they were just working me over big time. And so then I got in the military and found out in the military it's not any better. You've been in the military. When you get in the military, and you get in advanced military, especially get out of basic, there are very few rules. And when I went to Korea, I tell everybody, if you ever watched MASH, that's exactly how it was in my experience. That was not an exaggeration. And that's the sad part. And everybody around me at night would come off duty. Guys would come off duty about 11 o'clock, after they ate a meal, they'd come in the barracks. If you're trying to sleep there, you're going to wake up. They're all smoking dope all around you and drinking and gambling and having fun, whatever, playing cards. And you can't just relax in that atmosphere. A lot of stuff going on and a lot of stuff being said. And when you're in that kind of environment, it's just something you're not, you just wouldn't want to do that if you didn't have a choice, if you had a choice. And so I've been there. So I I look at this verse, I say, surely men of low degree. And I'm talking about somebody who, in my mind, somebody who's of low degree is not somebody who's poor. It's not talking about somebody who's down and out on their luck. It's not talking about that kind of person. It's talking about people who choose to live a base life, people who choose to be rebellious, people who choose to break the rules, people who choose to bully others around, people who choose to steal, people who choose to rob. It's people who make a choice to live in sort of a low kind of life, and they're content with that. That's the life they're going to live, and that's a sad part. Then you have men of high degree, which is the opposite, and he's saying both of this crowd, whether you're of low degree, your life's only a vapor. So if somebody's hurting someone else, pressing against someone else, trying to threaten somebody else, here's David just saying that person is living a low degree life, and their life's just a vapor. Then he talks about high degree, people who think they have status, people who have a name, they like their name, they like their titles, they kind of live above the clouds. They don't want to get their hands dirty with other people. The people who are just sort of better than anybody else. And he's just saying those folks who have a sort of a high degree mentality, they're just living a lie. And he says if they are weighed on the scales, they are altogether lighter than vapor. He's talking about both groups. And then he says, do not trust in oppression. So he's saying to those in the low life, perhaps, or even in the high life, do not trust in oppression. Don't think you're going to get away with that. Don't vainly hope in robbery. It's not going to help you, really. He says, if riches increase, do not set your heart on them. So he's just addressing the fact that there are those like that, and they're trusting in everything else except God. And so he comes back and says, God has spoken once, twice I have heard this. That power belongs to God. That's the first thing he wants to say. And secondly, O Lord, to you, O Lord, belongs mercy. As he kind of winds this down, he's just reminding everyone that, God has power, and he's talking about God's sovereign, all-powerful nature, that God is in control and God can do anything. And he's already told you and I that we can trust that God. This God we can put our trust in. He's absolutely sovereign. He's all-powerful, and which is wonderful. But then he also wants us to know another part of God, which is not true of the two men he just talked about. Men of low degree or high degree who are living a lie. He said, these men will never have mercy. These men will never express mercy to anyone. They're very self-serving. And so he wants us to know that God is not only all-powerful, but God is also all-merciful. So again, we aren't saved. We cannot be saved if Jesus doesn't save us, and he can only save us because he's all-powerful. But secondly, he won't save us if he's not all-merciful. So he has to be both. So he's just reminding these men that this one he's put his trust in is, number one, he's all-merciful. That's why he does love us. He couldn't save us if he wasn't all-powerful. But he is going to save us because he's not only all-powerful, he's all-merciful. It's an amazing little sort of a double statement that he makes here. And then he just says, for you render to each one according to his work, just reminding these enemies of his that you're out, you're isolated, you're cut off if you don't have trust in this God. A couple of things to notice in this entire psalm. The idea of assurance here, because he's talking about trusting. The idea of assurance is so strong and dominant in this psalm, there isn't even one single petition voiced by David. When you read almost all of his other psalms, he's usually in some place, if he's crying out to God in one place, he's calling on God to do something in the other. If he's expressing faith here, he may be mentioning his fear here and calling on God. But here he's not asking God to do anything. He's just making a declaration that God is who he is, that God does what God's going to do, and God is going to absolutely save him, and God is trustworthy. And so he's making that declaration so strong and so true. And so, it's one of those things. And so I want to go back and just remind us, when he talks about silently waiting, and I think down in verse 5, he says, my soul waits silently for God. He says it again. He's just trying to express to us that there's no room here this is what really gets me. There's no room here for worry. And if you're somebody who worries, here's David in this psalm saying you don't need to worry if you're really trusting him. There's no word for fear in this text. There's no word here for doubt. He has this absolute sense of God's deliverance, and then he uses that great word that I love in verse 5, my expectation is from you. So when we talk about trusting God for something, when I talk about praying, when something big is coming into my life and I'm trying to rein in my fears and my concerns by saying, wait a minute, no, I have to trust the Lord. I can't worry about if I don't have resources or if I don't have strength, if I don't have the wisdom to deal with something. I don't have to worry about that because I'm silently waiting for God. Doesn't mean I sit and do nothing. I don't think that's what it means. That's the other thing. It's not like we just sit down and go, well, God's in charge and here we go. I think what it means is that I'm silently waiting for God to communicate with me what I should do, how I should respond. Certainly the issue of trust has to be in the forefront of the result of being with the Lord. And then when he comes back in verse 5 and says it over again, he's really stressing this issue. I've got to learn to let go of my fears and my concerns. Being in my position, I hear a lot of people talking about their worries, their fears, their concerns for their family, for their kids, sometimes it's, the unknown things they don't know about that they're worried about. Sometimes it's money. There's all kinds of they think a husband or a spouse is doing something wrong. There's all kinds of stuff you hear about. And I know that no one wants to hear me say this when they come into my office. The best strategy you can have for dealing with your problems, you can talk to me all you want, but the best strategy you're going to have is silently listening and trusting that God knows, God cares, and God will act if you lay it at his feet and trust him. Most people don't want to hear that. They want to hear like, okay, well, here's a strategy. Here's what you can do. Here's A, B, C, and D. Here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And, obviously, if we do that, of course, that sounds good, a recipe. Now I know what to do. Okay, I can leave and go do that. And sometimes I do throw out 1, 2, 3, and 4 and A, B, C. Sometimes you have to give practical advice. But still, above that, there has to be this relinquishing of trying to figure it out humanly and just say, you know what, this is so big. Only God can deliver this. And maybe God allowed this in our lives only for that reason, so that he can be magnified. And I won't try to use every kind of resource I have to try to figure it out and then blow it all the way through. You understand what I'm saying? This psalm is so important for us to grasp tonight. I hope you can just take this and sort of process through this because that's what it's here for. And so we can, come at the end of the psalm and say, okay, wait a minute, is God enough in my life? Is he enough of a resource for me? Is he what I really need to be depending on? Am I really depending on him, or I'm just sort of using him as a partial crutch to get through something while I figure everything out? How much do I actually truly trust the Lord? That's the question. And David says, I silently wait because he's my expectation. I love that. I love that verse. It's a great verse to learn and memorize and exercise in our lives. So that's kind of a challenge from this psalm tonight. And I hope that nothing else encourages you with whatever you're dealing with. Lord, thank you for your word. Again, we are here tonight just taking in what is being said. I pray that you'll take this word and just kind of cause us to ponder it and maybe take it home and read it again and ask ourselves some hard questions about where we're at in this area of trust. Some of us are fretting over our kids. Even I am. We can worry about that, and we can get that so deeply twisted into our heart that we can't shake it, can't sleep. Sometimes it robs us of even appetite. We realize we're just powerless sometimes at certain things that we're facing. But yet, Lord, you understand that that's where you come in. That's what you where you want us to be. You want us to be in a point where we realize we have no strength, no resource, no recourse, no power, because you do. And so, Lord, not that we want to script how you're going to fix things, but we want to turn them over to you and just trust you with the end result. That's what David did here. And Lord, if he could gain that kind of peace in the midst of his turmoil, then how much we can gain peace to allow us to sleep through the night and not be so fretting over something that we can't control. But you know all things. You understand what we're going through. And I pray, Lord, that you would just have access into our hearts, help us to understand and yield ourselves to you in a way that we truly, fully, only trust you.